Hi, and welcome back to another edition of Conversations. I hope you're enjoying what we've been doing so far, and you've been able to encourage your friends or family to engage in this conversation as well. Tonight, we're finishing up chapter 11 in the Gospel of Luke. And up to this point, we've noticed that Jesus has addressed the unbelief of some of his detractors. And in this part of Luke chapter 11, Jesus kind of gives a full-on criticism of some of those people, the Pharisees and the lawyers. Those are the people in the New Testament that I like to call the people we love to hate. And indeed they are, and perhaps with good reason. But his criticism here focuses on several things. Number one, when they see Jesus not participating in the ritual washing of his hands before dinner, he takes the opportunity to point out the flaw in their religious behavior. He says, cleansing dishes on the outside really doesn't do anything to address the problems of the inner man, where indeed forgiveness is needed. And that's something Jesus has been talking about up to this point in his ministry. He criticizes them for being so fastidious about putting aside 10% of all these tiny little garden herbs, but fail to tend to the weightier matters of the law, justice and the love of God. He says, you guys should be thinking about those. He also criticizes them for just loving to be honored by society. And Jesus says, in fact, you're really like unmarked graves. As Matthew tells this particular part of Jesus' discussion, Matthew notes that when people walk over them, they're more like dead men's bones inside. That's the key to what I think Luke is trying to say as well. And of course, Jesus turns to the lawyers as well. They're really no better. They place expectations on others that they themselves are unwilling to bear up. And they persecute the prophets, and they hinder others from coming to faith. Jesus doesn't have much good to say about these folks, and he's pretty unhindered in telling them exactly what they need to hear. And finally, when we begin chapter 12, Jesus tells his own disciples, these people are really just a bunch of hypocrites. They're people who put on masks and pretend to be something that they're not. And Jesus warns his disciples, be careful, because all of what you do is going to be revealed at some point. And so these people really can't continue to hide behind their masks, and neither can we. And I think this is a good time for us to stop and think for just a few minutes, not just to think about, the Pharisees and lawyers, but I tend to think these sins are really common to all of us. Do we not sometimes go to church, put on a good face, but sometimes when we go out, we really fail to love our neighbor as ourselves? Or sometimes do we not have very high expectations of what we expect others to do, but often don't hold ourselves to the same standard? And so I think this passage is worthy of a close look, but it's also worthy of a time for us to look within and around you. I don't think it's a time to just feel better than all those dirty, rotten hypocrites. A closer look at your own heart probably reveals some of the same tendencies. I think also a closer look even at those who are not religious folks reveals that they too can be pretty self-righteous, maybe even demand more of others than they demand of themselves, and sometimes prevent people from entering the kingdom of God. You've probably heard it said, I've heard it more times than I'd like to count, well, I don't want to go to church because all the hypocrites in the church. I only want to ask you this question. Are you going to let somebody else's bad behavior dictate yours? So don't let the hypocrisy of others prevent you from becoming a Christian. The issues are just entirely too important. Thank you. I look forward to hearing from you.